And just like that, we are back. This is the AEW All In 2024 London post-show. And what a show, to be honest with you. What a show it was from AEW. What a show it was from All Elite Wrestling. Of course, the second year, they're back at Wembley Stadium. Attendance wasn't as high as it was last year. Wasn't necessarily expected to be. Of course, they're not going to be in London next year. They're going to be in Texas. 2026, they will be back for All In. And in terms of just an overall show, AEW, I think, absolutely knocked it out of the park. I think everyone this evening can probably be very, very, very happy with their efforts that they put in. I think AEW can be thrilled with a show that they've put on. I think the matches, all probably bar one, all absolutely delivered. I think the crowd was absolutely fantastic. I think largely the outcomes in near enough every match was probably correct. I feel like there were surprises. I feel like there were fan service. I think that production was really, really good for AEW tonight. And so sometimes with AEW, that can be a bit of a point of contention, can't it? Sometimes, you know, camera angles and what have you. But I think production did a really, really good job this evening. And just overall, it's just a really good show. And it felt like, you know, AEW All In has kind of been said that, you know, it's AEW's version of WrestleMania, isn't it? It's their biggest show of the year. And I know that, you know, Double or Nothing was their first, and then they had Grand Slam, and everyone was like, that's the biggest show of the year. That's the biggest show of the year. AEW All In is AEW's biggest show of the year. You know, when it's at Wembley Stadium 2 years in a row, when it's at, you know, it's going to be a Globe Life Field in Texas next year. It's their biggest show of the year. And I think probably the biggest compliment you could give AEW this evening is it felt like their biggest show of the year. The main event felt like the biggest main event of the year for AEW. The crowd, the emotion, the action, all of it delivered. A lot of the matches felt like big pay-per-view money matches. And I think AEW delivered on that point. Now, can they carry that on into weekly television? Can they carry that on in terms of attendance, in terms of ratings and viewership? Look, time will tell when it comes to all of that. AEW still certainly has its flaws. AEW still certainly has a lot of criticisms that are valid. I think one thing you can't really criticize AEW for is their pay-per-views. Their pay-per-views, the majority of the time, tend to deliver. Do they drag on sometimes? Yes. I actually felt like this evening, you maybe could have taken one match out, but I thought on the whole, the main card felt largely well-paced. Most matches, not all, but most matches had total buy-in from the audience. The ends, sometimes with these long AEW pay-per-views, the pay-per-view can kind of feel like not an afterthought, but like, oh, I just want the show to get over with. But not today, certainly. And you look at some of the biggest and most rewarding matches on this show, and the majority of it is tied to story. You know, when it is the Mariah May, Toni Storm, whether it is Will Ospreay, MJF, whether it is Swerve Strickland versus Bryan Danielson, they've baked story into those matches, and they have all absolutely delivered this evening. So I think huge credit to AEW for a fantastic show, a great pay-per-view that absolutely delivered. But I think it's right to not be in London next year. This is coming from a Brit. I think it's right to be in Texas next year. I do think if you're going to do your WrestleMania, it has to go around to stadiums around the world, possibly, or certainly in Europe or into North America and what have you. It's going to be back in London for 2026, which again, going away for a year is probably the right thing, but absolutely delivered on the show. And I think again, probably 90% of these matches on this show absolutely, totally delivered. This is the AEW All In Post Show here at Wrestle News 365. Be sure to smash a like on the like button. Be sure to subscribe bottom right-hand corner. We did hit the target this evening, which was 18,150. If you haven't already, click the like button. We've already got nearly 70 people through the door, which is fantastic. I can see King in the chat says, what an effing pay-per-view. Lil Yo-Yo, who was at the event, says, what a show. Certainly, I would think most people in attendance, clearly, at the end of the night, were really, really enjoying what they saw. No doubt about that. As far as 0 hour stuff, I do want to brush through the 0 hour stuff very, very briefly because it was largely just, can we get people onto the show, basically. So you had this 16-man tag team match where the babyfaces won. That's Tommy Billington, Kip Sabian, Rocky Romero, Kyle Fletcher, Lio Rush, Action Andretti, Top Flight. They beat Jay Lethal, Satnam Singh, Anthony Ogogo, Arya Davari, Private Party, and the Dark Order. Can't even really remember that much about it because it was not really worth remembering that much about. We had the mixed tag. Willow, Nightingale, Tomohiro, Ishii defeated Kris, Statlander, and Stokely Hathaway by pinfall. That means Nightingale wins the choice of the stipulation for the CMLL Women's World Championship match between Nightingale and Statlander at All Out. You then also had this 10-man tag team match where the Von Erichs, Sammy Guevara, Shibata, and Dustin Rhodes defeated the Undisputed Kingdom and Cage of Agony. Also, a really significant point on the pre-show, probably the most significant point of the whole 0-hour pre-show, was the return of Jamie Hayter. Yes, after over a year out of action, after being forced to miss AEW All In last year because of injury, Jamie Hayter is back. Jamie Hayter interrupted a segment with Saraya and the Knight family. Saraya was out there saying, I didn't have a match this year. I won the Women's World title last year, and now I don't have a match. This is bullshit, and all that kind of stuff. And out comes Jamie Hayter. Great reaction, great response. It was the first of many surprises this evening, and to be honest, all the surprises really did deliver from AEW. But Jamie Hayter's back, not a moment too soon. I think the women's division, I do think there have been improvements in the women's division. Again, still has its flaw. I still think it needs more representation on cards. For instance, this evening we had 2 women's matches. We could have probably had more. But and I would like to see more main events. But Jamie Hayter's legit. Jamie Hayter's legit when it comes to her in-ring work. She has been sorely missed over the last a year, and great to have her back. So really excited about that. Whether it leads to a match with Hayter and Saraya, I don't know. I don't really have a lot of interest in really seeing that match, in all honesty. It might. Just thinking about it, it might be the way to write Saraya off AEW TV. Her contract's coming up next month. It's been a couple of years since she debuted in AEW at the Grand Slam edition of Dynamite. Hasn't really set the world alight, in all honesty. And it might be the way to write her off. They are in talks over a new deal, so she still might stick around. But we shall see when it comes to that. But let's get into the main card, because really that's what it was all about. And the show kicked off with one of Christian Cage's appearances this evening. And the reason I say one is because it was a busy night for the Father of the Year. We began with the AEW World Trios title match, the Ladders of London match. And to be honest with you, it was a ladder match. I know it seems like the most basic analysis, but my point being is it's what you would expect from a ladder match, which is, death-defying stunts, people going through tables, people jumping off ladders, people doing crazy stuff. I mean, that's largely what it was. It's that kind of thing. I suppose the most surprising element of it was the winners, in all honesty. It looks like, by the way, that Pac is a member of the Blackpool Combat Club at this point, because at the end of the show, he was out there with Bryan Danielson celebrating, along with Claudio Castagnoli, Wheeler Yuta, and the Danielson family, all holding gold, because we've got brand new AEW World Trios champions in Castagnoli, Wheeler Yuta, and Pac. Pac's the one that claims the titles at the end of it. It's pretty much confirmation that the Lucha Brothers are gone from AEW. They would have been in this match. The inclusion of that team, because you're looking at established trios here. You got the Patriarchy, established trio. You got the Bang Bang Gang, established faction. You've got the House of Black, established faction. And then you've got this mismatched team of 2 members of the Blackpool Combat Club and 1 member of Death Triangle. But the other 2 members of Death Triangle aren't really around anymore. They're not gone from AEW just yet, but they're going to be gone. So it looks like Pac's kind of been picked up out of that Death Triangle faction because the Lucha Brothers are off, and he's now in the Blackpool Combat Club. They win the match. I'm happy for Pac. He had to miss AEW All In last year through injury. That's a story for quite a few people on this card. But it did at the time, and now it makes more sense in retrospect. But at the time, you went, the one trio that's not a trio of one. Why? But it's probably because, again, it's all, the Blackpool Combat Club is kind of united now with having gold. So as far as the match, again, it's kind of, it's almost like Pro Wrestling 101 in sort of 2024, isn't it? Start a big show with a ladder match. WWE did it this year at WrestleMania, didn't they? Started with a ladder match. I don't know if it was one of the nights started with a ladder match, or if not, you have a ladder match on early. Big cards have ladder matches on, because that's how you get people onto the card. So it felt like, didn't it, that the Patriarchy lost. What happens now? What happens now that the Patriarchy have dropped the championships? Well, stay tuned for that, because it wasn't Christian Cage's only appearance of the evening, and him being a dastardly heel bastard continues, and he uses and manipulates people to get what he wants, and even in the faces of defeat and frustration and anger of losing his titles this evening, he finds a way to actually come out better than he went into the evening, because that's what Christian Cage does, isn't it? Right, now we got to go on to, which I thought when I was watching this in real time, I thought, I'm not sure if people are going to be able to top this match. And I think they probably did with the main event, and maybe the Casino Gauntlet match, but at the time I thought, I just don't know how people are going to follow this. And this is the AEW Women's World Title match. And for me, I think now, if you're having conversations about what is the greatest women's match in All Elite Wrestling history, I think this is a very, very, very strong contender for when you're talking about the greatest women's matches in AEW history. And for them to do this in the position that they had on the card, second on the biggest show of the year, is difficult. Really, really difficult. Second on the biggest show of the year after a ladder match is tough. Because you've had the excitement, the crowd have been excited, they've been happy, they're like, oh, we're at Wembley, this is great, it's all in, it's the biggest show of the year for AEW, we're excited. You've had the car crash, the human demolition derby, of people jumping off ladders and going through tables and all that kind of stuff. You've seen that. And you've also seen, a home country person in Pac win. What happens then? Everyone has to take a breath, everyone has to calm down. So it's not easy. But this is why stories matter. This is why storytelling matters. This is why it shouldn't just be, it's just about stories or it's just about matches. It's both. That's what pro wrestling is. It's both. It's a hybrid of both. And because there was so much story baked into this one, because, since Mariah May came into AEW, the story has been her, in retrospect, manipulating Toni Storm, getting under her wing, getting close, learning from her, developing from her, eventually just to turn on her, bloody her, and now take her title from her, with Mariah May being the new AEW World Champion. That's why story is important. That's why, you have to build up matches that way. And then you have to hope that the people involved can pay it off with a great match and a great audience. And that's what it is. And the story was so great, by the way. Toni Storm's the one getting cheered. Mariah May, she's from England. She's from London. The show's at Wembley Stadium. But Toni Storm's the one getting cheered because the story was so strong. But they've still got to deliver the match. And they absolutely delivered the match. The crowd was red hot for it. Mariah May, I think, is such a great worker. So is Toni Storm. She's a great character, but also a great worker. And you knew when they showed Mariah May's mother at ringside that it was going to be, well, she's going to be involved, isn't she? She's going to be involved somehow. And what really happened was Mariah May slapped her own mother in the face. And then eventually Toni Storm hit a Storm Zero on the steps and then went over to Mariah May's mother to hug her. That was actually all a big distraction so Mariah May could actually get color, because she has to get color. Because, of course, when it came to the turn in the first place from Mariah May, of course she bloodied Toni Storm, didn't she? And that was what was so good. So that told the story with that, and then ultimately they tell the story later on, don't they? They tell the story with the shoe gets involved. The shoe gets involved. Watch for the shoe. It was the shoe that cut Toni Storm open as well. And Toni Storm, she couldn't do it. That allowed for the distraction. Mariah May gets the victory. And it was just a great match. And again, at the time, I thought, man, is she going to be able to, are they going to be able to, who's going to be able to follow this? Again, and that was second on the show. So Mariah May gets the win, which, by the way, is the right decision, right outcome, absolutely. Story's not over. One of the things I didn't kind of get is afterwards, Toni Storm's like laughing or crying and sort of flailing around. I guess that's the character, but it's definitely, the story's not done. But It was brilliant. It was a really, really, really good match. And like I said, for me, I think if you're going to talk about some of the greatest women's matches in AEW history, I think that's right up there. And Mariah May, she hasn't even scratched the surface, I think, in her potential. She's still incredibly young. And the matches that she could have with people on the AEW women's roster, I think is really, really exciting. So, so I thought that was a fantastic match and a very exciting one, definitely. Right, so when we follow that, how can you follow that? Well, you follow that with a 10-minute Chris Jericho FTW Championship match. That's how you follow that. And there was a couple of points in this show which you do sort of go, one would have been Chris Jericho singing himself to the ring for the second year in the row. It's lucky he's a wrestler, I would say, when it comes to that. His entrance was certainly something, and we had a couple of live entrances on the show. The one for Swerve would probably, I comfortably say, considerably better than the Jericho one. It's an FTW Championship match, so it's gimmicks. There was a lot of, obviously, it's in the UK, so they've got to be British gimmicks. So there's cricket balls, there's cricket bats. It's largely 3-on-1 because you've got, Big Bill, the most popular man in England, apparently at the moment. The only time Hook got booed is when Big Bill, when he had to attack Big Bill. Bryan Keith gets involved too. But I think the reason that I don't think people will be sour on this match is because of the finish. It largely, again, nowadays with Jericho, I know Jericho says, like, I can still have great matches and I can still have the best match on the show. It's like, well, you can't, What Jericho's still able to do for his age, no doubt about it. And look, he's still Chris Jericho, so, he still holds cachet. Of course he does. I do think what is kind of maybe lost on him is that what used to work a lot for him in WWE is that he used to go away for quite a lot of the time, right? He used to go away for like 3 months, 6 months, maybe even a year, come back, new character, new run, be in WWE for 6 months, be in WWE for 3 months, be back for a year, and then go, and then come back again. And that works because people can get bored, or people can sort of resent the Jericho vortex, as it were. And the learning tree stuff, it's kind of a mixed bag, isn't it? Because he has got it over to an extent. He has. His thing with high guys, you cannot argue that has got over. It has got over, But the other parts of it are still quite wish-washy, aren't they? But as I mentioned, the reason why I think that people largely won't care, about the Fozzy entrance or the Jericho stuff is because the finish. And the finish is Taz, who needs this shoulder, this knee, that knee replaced, gets up from the announce table, breaks his headphones, by the way. He had to get a new headset after this, smashes his headphones down on the floor, puts in the Tazmission on Bryan Keith. Hook locks in the Red Rum on Chris Jericho. Jericho taps out. Hook wins. He's a 3-time FTW champion. And everyone lost their shit because Taz locked in the Tazmission. And you know what it is? Yeah, you know what it is? That's when you see Taz. It was 10 minutes long. It didn't go too long. Those FTW matches are kind of sort of, quirky weapons, whatever. I think it was largely fun. You know what I mean? I think it was largely fun. It didn't overstay its welcome, which I think was the key for that. If that had gone 15 minutes, you go, that's gone way too long. 10 minutes is fine. The Taz bit at the end, it's a feel-good moment. I think for what it was, it largely delivered. Your expectations, I don't think, can be too high when it comes to that. I think largely it delivered. So I'll give that one a pass. I wasn't too like, oh, terrible, shouldn't be on the card. I thought that was fine, in all honesty. This was quite interesting. The next match was interesting. The AEW World Tag Team Championships. And the reason I say this is interesting because I think in retrospect, did it really live to expectations? I'd probably say no. I think when you've got the Young Bucks and when you've got FTR, you have high expectations. For a Young Bucks pay-per-view match, it went surprisingly short. I mean, the Young Bucks get the victory after 13 minutes, which again is surprisingly short for them. You know, sometimes the Young Bucks on pay-per-views, they go with FTR, they go these like 20, 25 minutes sort of classics that they 10 million near falls and false finishes and what have you. That wasn't the case this time round. And when the finish came and the Young Bucks get the win, it was a bit like, well, that kind of came a bit out of nowhere, wasn't it? You went, oh, the Young Bucks win with the EVP trigger, and you go, oh, okay, they won. I expected them to win. They go, okay. And then the Grizzled Young Veterans come out afterwards. And again, it was like, I get it's in England, so they get a pop. But with the other surprises that came in the evening, that doesn't really rank up there, I don't think, you know. And they were also on Collision recently. And it was a bit like, okay, but we have seen them, you know. So, like, what we doing? So it did feel like, well, we got to get the Bucks on the show and FTR because they have their match every year at All In, and we'll throw the Acclaimed in this time just so it's a bit different. But in retrospect, to be honest, it felt like a match that would have probably been on like Dynamite or Collision or something like that. And if it was on Dynamite or Collision, it'd have probably gone longer than sort of 13 minutes. So it was a bit flat. It looks like we're going to get Grizzled Young Veterans versus the Young Bucks, which again I don't know if there was really a sort of screaming demand for that. And that's now upon AEW to make the audience want that and make the audience excited for that. I mean, not only that, but then they did attack FTR as well. So what they are in terms of being a heel or a babyface, we still don't kind of know because they attacked Cash Wheeler afterwards too. So maybe they feud with FTR, perhaps. But then what does that mean for the Bucks? It felt a little bit weird, that one. And it was a bit flat. So that's why I sort of say that was one where you sort of go, the match, obviously, between the Bucks and FTR last year, All In, was far better. But that went far longer. I don't know. I was just kind of like, okay, that could have been a TV tag. But you know, Young Bucks win, which was expected, and that's that. Now the next match, probably, if I was going to say my top 3 matches of the evening, I would obviously say the main event. I'd say Mariah May, Toni Storm, and I'd also say this. I'd say the Casino Gauntlet match. What a brilliant match type this is. I think this is, you know, it's AEW. I've used it a few times. Obviously, they've done it on a couple of Dynamites, haven't they? And it's a fantastic concept. You know, it's Royal Rumble with pinfalls, basically. And it means surprises. It means countdowns. And it's just a lot of fun, isn't it? It's a lot of fun. And there was a bunch of surprises in this. A bunch of surprises. The crowd absolutely loved it. Now, in terms of surprises, because you won't see the people on the screen, you had the returning Nigel McGuinness. Yes, after, gosh, what is that, like close to 15 years, Nigel McGuinness wrestles his first match. It looked like last year there probably were plans to do Bryan Danielson versus Nigel McGuinness at Wembley. Danielson had a broken arm, didn't happen. He was in great shape then. He's in great shape now. And by the way, he can still fucking go. I don't know if you saw him in there. He doesn't look like he's lost a step. I hope that's not just a, you know, it's Wembley. We wanted to get Nigel there. He wanted to, you know, wrestled at Wembley in his career. Now he's going to go back to commentary. He did an interview recently where he said, look, I do have some interest in something, but I would never want to leave commentary. I don't want to see Nigel McGuinness leave commentary full time. But if he wants to wrestle matches, he should, because he did not feel out of place. And honestly, if you're looking at the field that was in this match, it's a who's who of people. 2024. You've got a match that includes Christian Cage, Orange Cassidy, Kazuchika Okada, Nigel McGuinness, Kyle O'Reilly, Zack Sabre Jr., Roderick Strong, Mark Briscoe, Hangman Page, Jeff Jarrett, Killswitch, and Ricochet. I mean, what a lineup. What a lineup that is. So Nigel McGuinness was a third person in. The first two were Orange Cassidy and Kazuchika Okada. Next was Kyle O'Reilly came in. Zack Sabre Jr., into the match, of course, recently just won the G1 Climax tournament in New Japan Pro Wrestling. Zack Sabre Jr. looks great. You had Roderick Strong, Mark Briscoe, came out great pop. Hangman Adam Page, who is still, I guess, moving into madness, because later on in the show he gets involved. He doesn't win this match, so he doesn't get the World Championship opportunity that he's looking for. So how he's going to do that, he's still going to get his hands on Ricochet, but he doesn't need to have the AEW World Championship now, which I suppose is useful for him. Jeff Jarrett, I mean, what a career renaissance Jeff Jarrett's had, by the way. I mean, the guy was a joke. I mean, in all honesty, he was. I mean, he was involved. He got back involved with, TNA, Global Force Wrestling, back in, 2017. He had his personal problems and, the GFW selling gold bars and all that nonsense. Turns his life around, had a lot of personal problems at the time, finds sobriety, turns his life around, goes to WWE for a little while, does some stuff there, kind of closes that chapter, which I'm glad for him. I am, because the way he left WWE in 99 was so acrimonious. And then he was the opposition for years in TNA, which I am actually really grateful for, because I don't think monopolies should exist in pro wrestling. So, and then he goes to AEW and he's coming out getting pops. He's wrestling at Wembley Stadium. He looks great. He's in his mid to late 50s or something. So what a career renaissance. He's got this feud of Hangman going, which is great. Ricochet, worst kept secret in professional wrestling, makes his AEW debut. He's all elite. He fits in AEW, doesn't he? It fits better for him there. He's going to do those matches with Will Ospreay and with probably MJF that are going to have a million high spots that will get heavily criticized for being too choreographed. But I think in terms of a fit, it will work out better for him there. Not to say he was being misused in WWE or anything like that. Not slander on WWE, because guess what? It's work, people. It's wrestling. You can go to other companies. You can work in other places. In football, you can play for other football teams. Not one person owns it. You can go somewhere. You can make money. He's probably making more money now than he was in AEW, because he would have got a bigger contract, because he's not as important in WWE. Good for him. So it fits in AEW. Whether or not how well he'll be used, time will tell. AEW does not have the best track record of signing people and then 6 months in we go, I'll tell you what, they've done really well. Some people they have, some people they haven't. But then that's kind of the average in wrestling, in all honesty. But it gets a great pop. Does some crazy stuff that Ricochet does, because he's Ricochet. As far as what he does next, I don't know if there'll be anything coming out of this match, because it felt like largely a showcase. I would think they're going to probably move fairly quickly to Ricochet versus Ospreay. Not as so quickly like, it's going to happen at All Out. But they'll go for it quick. I mean, look, they've also got a bunch of stadium shows next year that they've got to fill. And AEW do have big matches they can do. So Ricochet, I think, is a welcome addition to the AEW roster when it comes to that. But the finish. You know what? The reaction to the finish is really interesting, isn't it? Because there are people like, I love that match. I hated the finish. Because what happens is Christian Cage comes out at one point. You go, Christian Cage, he's wrestling again. He's out again. He limps to the ring. He got taken out straight away, I think, by Ricochet. And then didn't do that much. And then, last person, it's not Killswitch, it's Luchasaurus. He's announced as Luchasaurus. He's got his old Luchasaurus theme music. He comes out. It looks like he's going to chokeslam Christian Cage. And everyone's like, this is the turn. It's going to happen. Instead, chokeslams Kyle O'Reilly. Puts Christian Cage over the top, and Christian Cage wins. And you know what? I don't hate it. Now, for me, I would have rather Nigel McGuinness won. I would have rather Nigel McGuinness won. He's got that Future World Championship match, and it's like a case of we do the Danielson McGuinness match at some point for the world title. Not that McGuinness would win, but they could do that, and that'd be Arthur Ashe Stadium or something. That'd be great. I still think we're going to have that match, by the way. I still think we're going to have that match. But the reason I'm not totally against it is because that fits Christian Cage. Christian Cage is a prick. That's what he is. He cheats. He does what people hate. Every time he's won championships, a couple of the times, he wasn't even initially the champion. He took him off Luchasaurus a bunch of times. When he was the Trios champion, he was himself the three title holders, and then he gave the title to a woman in Mother Wayne, who's not even a wrestler. She's the mother of one of the people in his faction. He's a prick. That's what he does. That's Christian Cage. And why wouldn't he do that? Why wouldn't he come out and be like, and screw everyone over? You're really enjoying this match? Screw you, I'm going to win it. It fits. That does fit. Now, as far as what he does with that World Championship, I don't know if I really have a desire to see Christian Cage versus Bryan Danielson for the AEW World Championship. Great wrestlers, but I'm just not really sure that's like, oh, that really tickles my fancy. He can cash it in at any point. I was half expecting him to come out at the end of the show and try something because that's Christian Cage, but they didn't do that. When he would cash in, I really don't know. I really don't. My only thing I can think of is that it's Darby Allin wins the championship. It's been rumored, possibly at Grand Slam. And Christian Cage maybe tries to sort of cash it in, or they have a match at Wrestle Dream. They main evented Wrestle Dream last year. That was Darby versus Christian Cage TNT title. Maybe they run it back. Maybe they run it back for the AEW World title. But I don't know necessarily where that one goes. Maybe he saves it into October. Of course, AEW's going head-to-head with NXT. Maybe they have a World title match, Title Tuesday. Perhaps that's what they do. But I thought as a match, it was great. I mean, it was fan service. Everyone loves surprises, surprise entrance. And I think that delivered. It's a great match concept. The only thing I just hope AEW doesn't do is overdo it, because we have seen it a few times already this year. I felt like it suited this stage perfectly. Biggest show of the year, goes 25 minutes. You've got so many surprises. Like, I feel like that's a real good spot for it. It maybe can happen a couple more times in the year, but don't overdo it. Don't overdo it, because I think AEW's on to a winner with that match type. It's a lot of fun, and it can feel quite unique to AEW, can't it? So I really enjoyed that one. Then getting into sort of the latter part of the show. Next up was AEW American Championship. It is AEW American title no longer. Will Ospreay is the brand new AEW International Champion. He defeated MJF after 25 minutes, and it's exactly what you expected. It was a brilliant match. You can't really, argue against it. And again, I spoke earlier on, the best matches on this card, I think, maybe bar the Casino Gauntlet match, because it's a fan service match with surprises. Everyone loves surprises. But the singles matches, certainly, that delivered, all had story in it. The story of Will Ospreay has been he's not going to use the move. He's not going to use the move. Tiger Driver, Tiger Driver, Tiger Driver. He's not going to use the move. So you knew, well, he's probably going to win this match doing the Tiger Driver. But when he did it, it's the payoff. You know it's going to happen. But that's what you're waiting for. And as far as MJF on pay-per-view, largely delivers great matches. We know Ospreay on pay-per-view delivers great matches. Second time that they faced off, two completely different matches. Of course, one goes a distance, nearly 1 hour Broadway. This one, 25 minutes on pay-per-view at Wembley Stadium. But Ospreay felt like a big star. I think that's also a part of it. MJF, of course, he's established. He's been in the company since the beginning, former world champion. Ospreay feels like a big star. I think it really did help the international title. The international title felt like a big deal. Felt bigger than TNT title. We'll get to that later on. But it did make, I think, the AEW International Championship feel big. And as far as what happens next with this feud, I mean, that is interesting, because where does MJF go here? Technically, it's one apiece. They could run it back if they wanted to at the next pay-per-view. Or they do it at Dynamite Grand Slam. They could. I wouldn't be opposed to that. I think they probably will, actually, because they do have fantastic chemistry, no doubt about that. But Ospreay gets the victory. Tiger Driver. The only thing I would say coming out of this, my one criticism is never use streamers again at those stadium shows. They get tied up in all of the shit. They get tied up in all of the lights and all that kind of stuff, and they're just a pain, aren't they? Get in the ring. At different points, they're tripping over him. Bryce Remsburg, I think, spent the majority of the match not counting 1, 2, 3, trying to pull these bloody streamers down or throw them out of the ring. Just don't do the streamers. The streamers are a pain. Yeah, the streamers, no more streamers. The entrances were great in this as well. Ospreay had the Assassin's Creed tie-in. MJF had the most American entrance you can possibly get. He dropped an American flag with his face on. He's been doing it on Dynamite, but it was in Wembley Stadium, which is sacrilegious at this point. To do that at Wembley. But I thought it was a great match. Really enjoyable. And Ospreay really does feel like a big deal. He feels like a big deal. It was a big match. They've put a lot of time into this one. And again, I felt like it delivered. I felt like that absolutely delivered. Now, speaking of things delivering, this I felt was probably the low point of the show, which was the TBS Championship match. Now, I'm not really sure what my expectations were going into, because I didn't have massively high ones, because I will be honest when I say, in my opinion, I don't think Britt Baker is the best worker. I can find her stuff to be quite clunky at points and not very smooth. I mean, she had a match recently against Hikaru Shida, on Dynamite. It was the Blood and Guts one. And I felt like slow, like slow motion kind of, sometimes where it's like slow motion wrestling or things that are like half speed. I felt like it was that, and I felt the crowd at the time reacted to that. And that's what it kind of felt like tonight. I mean, again, difficult spot. It was a difficult spot because it's following Ospreay MJF, which is a great match. Hometown guy, home country guy, wins the title. It was difficult. But it's not impossible because we saw earlier on in the show, Mariah May and Toni Storm absolutely kill it. They were on second. They followed a ladder match at the opening of the show. It's not easy, but they did it. This match didn't click for me. It just didn't click. It just felt like they didn't have a lot of chemistry. Some of the stuff didn't really work out. Maybe the biggest pop is when it was the Eddie Guerrero spot, when Britt Baker does the whole, I got hit with a chair, or the championship it was rather, and Camille got thrown out. And that was about it. That really got the crowd going. The finish came out of nowhere. Monet threw Britt Baker kind of face neck first into the ropes and then hit the Monet maker and got the 1, 2, 3, and you went, So I don't know. I think you know what it is. In retrospect, I think this is probably a match that was probably bigger on paper. I think that you've got the first woman signed to AEW and Britt Baker. You've got the tagline CEO versus DMD. That's great, but Mercedes Moné in AEW is going to have better matches against Mariah May, Toni Storm, Jamie Hayter. She's going to have those better matches against those lot. And also with Mercedes Moné, her strength is her in-ring work, not her promos. So, her promos are pretty, sometimes they can be a bit of a rough listen. But the matches she's in usually delivers. You can't fault her in-ring work. I mean, she was part of a main event of WrestleMania with Bianca Belair, and that match was fantastic that night. So I have no doubt about her ability to work. But, it's a dance. You've got to have a dance partner. And I just don't think this one clicked tonight. Crowd were largely very flat for it. And again, I just don't think it really worked. I don't really see the desire to go back to it either. And again, it was, if I'm going to say, if you want, I don't really like to do the negative questions. What was the worst match on the show? But I would point to this and go, this was the match that I don't think lived up to expectation. I don't think, got the, I don't think hit the levels that it should necessarily. So that was, a bit disappointing in all honesty. Next up, we had the penultimate match of the evening. And to be honest, this one really surprised me. Not in the best way. It was the TNT Championship match. And the reason it surprised me is because I don't think you will see more of a straightforward title match involving Darby Allin in his career at AEW. He just got the shit kicked out of him for 9 minutes and then lost. Darby Allin, he came down, he had thumbtacks on his face, which was a bad idea because that cut him open, so he was bleeding very, very quickly. Jack Perry came down with a body bag. He tied up his hands with, Darby Allin's hands with tape. He wrapped up his feet with a belt. He threw him off the stage. He did some crazy bumps. He put him in a body bag. He dragged him back to the coffin. He put him in. Darby Allin sat up like he was Michael Myers. He popped his head out like he was in The Shining. Here's Johnny. Jack Perry kneed him in the face and he closed the lid. And that was it. He won. He didn't even go 10 minutes. Went 9 minutes. And I think the thing I would say with that is, if Darby Allin is going to be the next AEW World Champion, I get that, okay, right, he's got to lose this one. He can't win the TNT title. Fine. But I don't think that did anything for Darby Allin at all. Really at all. Luckily, he's already got the AEW World title match. So I suppose it doesn't necessarily matter. It's not as if how is he going to get a title match? He's already got it. He won the Royal Rampage, so that's fine. But for someone that's got that opportunity in the future, it didn't do Darby any favors, I don't think. After the match, I mean, to be honest, the best thing about this match again was afterwards, because the Young Bucks come out, Jack Perry comes out, they're going to set Darby Allin on fire, or the coffin on fire, like The Undertaker, Randy Orton back at No Mercy 2005. And you go, oh. And I thought, there's no way Wembley have signed off on that. I thought there's no way Wembley were allowed to do fire on it. So I was like, someone's coming out. And there had been rumors about Sting. And out he comes, Search and Destroy. Sting comes out. He's retired from matches, but he's still going to make occasional appearances. Chases off. I mean, only in pro wrestling, I suppose, can you have 3 young wrestlers get chased off by a guy in his 60s with face paint, dyed hair. He was grey the other day. I think his hair's spray painted black and with a baseball bat. That's pro wrestling for you, brother. But he got a great pop. And I'm sure everyone that was there in Wembley was like, oh my God, I didn't think I was going to see Sting. Last year I saw him, but I didn't think I was going to see him again. So that was a great moment. Seeing Sting come out, Search and Destroy play, it rocks. So I don't have complaints about that. And again, I think that's when people would just go, well, I don't really care, I saw Sting. The Sting moment was cool, so whatever. But when you do focus on the nitty-gritty booking of the match, I do think it will be, Darby could have done something. He didn't have to just get beat up and lose in 9 minutes. It could have done a bit more than that. And will that do anything for him? He's AEW World Champion, unless they're going to set up a future match for the AEW World Title between Jack Perry and Darby Allin. Is that the plan? So I wasn't sure about the actual execution, shall we say, of that match. And finally, the main event. I mean, to be honest with you, there's no way it couldn't deliver, But even with the expectations, it succeeded it. I mean, it is one of the matches of the year. It is. I don't actually have many words for it. In terms of a technical masterpiece, probably Danielson Ospreay is going to be better, obviously. But in terms of crowd, atmosphere, moment, emotion, that for me is pro wrestling. That for me is me sitting here miles away from Wembley Stadium. Right? I'm not in earshot. I'm hundreds of miles away at the moment from Wembley Stadium. And I'm invested. I'm sitting on the edge of my seat, chanting near falls, 1-2 kick out, going, I can't look at this because Swerve stomping a bloody Bryan Danielson in front of his kids. That is pro wrestling. Yeah? It's ridiculous. Look at it. There's a guy there. His family's at ringside. He's got the champions shouting at a little girl, making her cry. But it's emotion, and people are chanting yes and all that. That's wrestling. That is pro wrestling. That is taking you on an emotional roller coaster, having good moves and good matches, cool. But that is pro wrestling, and the crowd were into it. The crowd. This is also the beauty of pro wrestling is you didn't know. You didn't. I think the expectation was I think Bryan would probably win, but he is retiring this year. He is legitimately hurt. Why wouldn't he retire at the biggest show of the year? I suppose he could. He doesn't have a contract right now. Why not? Why? His family's at ringside. He might actually lose, and he doesn't want to be world champion. So I suppose it could. So you believed either way. He could retire. He could win. I think he probably will. But I don't know. That element of doubt, I'm not sure. That's pro wrestling. That is, again, every pinfall you go, this could be it. And it's not. You go, And every false finish, you go, this is going to be it. Oh, it's not. And it was just fantastic. I could go through move for move. I would never be able to do that match justice. Ever. Hangman and Swerve are going to have a match at some point. Hangman kind of got involved a bit. But he was chased off by security. Allowed Danielson to hit the Psycho knee. There were points where it felt like Swerve was going to win, but again, it's a Bryan Danielson classic. I mean, he truly is. I mean, I know when people name Mount Rushmore of wrestlers, Bryan Danielson won't be on there in terms of money drawers or whatever, but he's one of the best ever. He is, and that's not even just like an AEW thing. As his work in WWE, there's a reason he main evented WrestleMania 30, and broke WWE's plans that year because he's so good and so popular as the underdog babyface, and I think Bryan Danielson's a great heel because he's an asshole. But as an underdog babyface, there are not many better underdog babyfaces than Bryan Danielson, and that was classic underdog Bryan Danielson babyface night. Bloodied, crippled, family at ringside, reaching out to his daughter, saying, I'm sorry, and he's getting kicked, he's shouting, I love you to his family. That is classic underdog Bryan Danielson. The whole crowd going, yes, and I tell you what, I feel like the fact that he is dialed so back from the whole yes stuff mainly because it was WWE property, but now he's kind of just gone like, screw it, I don't care now. And he owns the trademark for a variation of it. And he's also like, what are you going to do? Sue me, tell me to stop using it, I'm going to use it. But because no one's been really, really doing that, for a while, the yes stuff, like it did feel fresh again. And it felt like, and you realize that when that yes chant gets going in a stadium, in an arena, it is a frenzy. It is an absolute frenzy. So I thought it was a brilliant match. I think I don't even say huge credit to Bryan Danielson because that's what he does. But I would say huge credit to Swerve Strickland. Talk about growth. And I mentioned this earlier on with Ricochet. And I know there's been a bunch of people that AEW have signed. A lot of people AEW signed. And they do game changer bullshit. And that's what it is. It's bullshit. It's a pissing contest between people online and it's dumb. But, and there's been a lot of signings that haven't worked out. But talk about a signing that has worked out in Swerve Strickland. Yeah, talk about a signing that has worked out in him. And that should be the blueprint of what AEW strives to achieve when they do sign people, which is let's build them into something. Let's not bring them in and just hope that they were that in this place or they were here and we're going to do that. Look at Swerve Strickland. Look at Mariah May. We can build them into something. We can turn them into world champions. And I tell you what's a credit with Swerve as well. He main evented Wembley tonight. He did not feel out of place at all. He went, that is a bona fide main eventer. From his entrance to his match, even to the tap out, whatever, he delivered. And to be honest with you, with Swerve, that's not always been the case in this title reign. He really started to pick up last year. Obviously, his stuff with Hangman was really the thing that made people go, actually, I tell you what, he could probably win world title here. But at the beginning of it, it was like, was this too soon? Does he feel like a world champion? Maybe he doesn't feel like a world champion yet. But I felt it was after or during the sort of Ospreay stuff, when he beat Ospreay, then you start to feel like, actually, I tell you what, he feels like a world champion. And I think credit to Will Ospreay for that. Because by all accounts, he went to Tony Khan and said, I know I'm facing MJF at Wembley. I know my creative. I'm facing MJF for the international title. I think a lot of people expect me to beat Swerve, or Swerve's going to be, I'm going to be wrestling for the world title at Wembley. Have him beat me. Show that the world title is more important than me, and the world champion is more important than me, because that's the main event. And you've got to build up his credibility, and he absolutely did that. And talk about someone that, built themselves up to be worthy of being a world champion, and then talk about someone who's continued to improve whilst being the world champion. And now after his world title reign, he feels like a bona fide main eventer. The only critical thing now for AEW is to continue that momentum with him. What we can't be saying is in 3 months' time, yeah, Swerve felt like red hot like 3 months ago. Now he's not really doing all that much and it feels kind of flat. But I hope with his work ethic and how he's, performed throughout his title reign, I have faith that he can carry that on. And what growth it is. And obviously at the beginning of the 0 Hour pre-show, he signed a new contract with AEW. So he's going to be around for the foreseeable future. So certainly, a big show. I think a really, really show that absolutely delivered for AEW. A couple of maybe duff matches here and there, but a main event that absolutely, totally delivered. And now it's just a case of, I think, for AEW to try and continue that momentum. They made a lot of announcements tonight. With shows, obviously, with Forbidden Door coming to London next year. They're moving the times as well, so it'll be this time next year it's going to be for Forbidden Door, because All In's going to be in July, which I like that. Didn't say where in London it's going to come, but it's going to be coming next year to London. They all announced AEW Grand Slam Australia. That's in February. It's a stadium show in Australia. It's a 50,000 seat stadium. Whether or not they'll do 40 or 30, I don't know. But again, big announcements. Obviously, All In's coming back to London in 2026. Didn't have the media rights announcement. Might come later on, I suppose. But really, really, really good show by AEW. Really exciting stuff. And hopefully they continue the momentum. How great is it? You've got two, as a wrestling fan, you've got two companies, in my opinion, putting on, great shows, great events. And in terms of their biggest shows, if you say that WrestleMania is obviously WWE's biggest show of the year, and AEW All In is their biggest event of the year, I would say absolutely both companies on their biggest show of the year more than delivered, absolutely. And as a wrestling fan, that's great, because not a particular fan of either company. I'm a fan of wrestling, and I hope to be entertained when I watched it. And I was this evening. So there you go, guys. Appreciate everyone that tuned in. Click the like button if you haven't already. Be sure to subscribe, bottom right-hand corner. We'll be back with more news, probably tomorrow now. But it's all going off in the world of wrestling, isn't it? Anyway, guys, I'm out of here. Peace.